Welcome again to the S.E.M podcast. Jack and Zach are back again. Tonight we're joined by our friend Jeff Hofmann. Jeff, it's so good to have you. What part of the world are you calling from?
I am in North Ogden, Utah.
North Ogden. Yep. Very good. Some of us have heard of North Ogden.
It's just north of Ogden, as the name implies.
Fantastic. Easy to figure it out. Well, Jeff, thank you for making time to come on tonight. Just as a reminder, we talk pre-mission, life since, or before you received your mission call. Then we'll jump over the mission, talk about life since you've been home from Scotland. Then we'll go back through areas, companions, and reminisce. So I'll turn the time to you.
So start off with the call, or
tell us about how you ended up in Scotland.
All right. So I've been a member of the church all my life. Lucky enough to be born into an LDS family. Grew up in Murray, Utah, and then I went to BYU for a year before my mission. And while I was there towards the end of the year, got my mission call. Didn't have a car, so I made my family drive down from Murray to Provo to watch me open it, and I had a bunch of friends from my ward there. Opened the call and read that I was called to the Scotland Edinburgh Mission. I don't think I'm the only one that did that, but that was I've always been kind of a know-it-all, not so much, hopefully getting a little bit better now than it was when I was younger, but that should have been the first indication that maybe I didn't actually know everything, but that's a theme that might come up as we talk more tonight.
Nice.
And so everyone, of course, no matter where I read, they were going to cheer, when they heard where I was going. But then I had to quiet them all down again, because then I read the next paragraph that said I would report to the Preston, England MTC, and no one had ever heard of that happening yet. When I got there, I found out that we were the first group of Americans called to Scotland that had gone to that MTC. There were a few other groups in the few weeks before us that were going to some of the missions in England, but I was part of that first group going to Scotland, and then went to the Preston MTC. So that was cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So tell us then the timeline when you entered the MTC, and from there when you returned home.
So I left in June of 1999. I think there's only 2 or maybe 3 missionaries who have done your podcast that are older than me as far as when they started their mission. Rhett Udy and Paul Williams, I think, might be the only ones. And I think Williams is only 1 month before me. Cool. Yeah, so I left in June of 99 to the MTC. That year Sunday was, or July 4th was on a Sunday, and we sang the Star Spangled Banner and God Save the Queen in sacrament meeting at the MTC. Cool. And then I actually flew home on July 4th, 2001. So, considered it my personal Independence Day from the missionary lifestyle and all of the rules. And also everyone all across the country, set off lots of fireworks to welcome me home. So that was pretty special.
That is, I love it. Cool. Well, take us to that memorable moment of coming home, July of 2001, and tell us more about life since that point in time. It's been a few years, Jeff.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the end of my mission is now in the first half of my life. Kind of an old man now. When I let my beard grow out a little bit, there's quite a lot of white hair in it. So I went back to BYU after my mission. I majored in broadcast journalism. Did not work in that field for very long after college. I was definitely more interested in the broadcasting part than the journalism part. Had a job right out of college as a production assistant on Marie Osmond's radio show, which was pretty cool. Nice. But it got canceled after less than a year. So, and since that time, I haven't really worked in that industry. So stayed in Provo for a few years after that, working some other jobs, and performed in an improv comedy group at BYU, and also worked at BYU Broadcasting. I feel like I probably would have been involved in some capacity, either behind the camera or in front of the camera with Studio C, if I had been there a few years later, or if it had started a few years earlier. So kind of jealous of those guys and girls. They do a great job though. And then from there, I moved to New York City, lived in Harlem for a few years. that was a great experience socially, culturally, spiritually, not a great experience economically. And so I ended up moving back to Utah, kind of forced my hand there. This is during the economic downturn of 08, 09. So I came back to Salt Lake City, lived with my parents for a while until I found a job, and eventually got a job with JetBlue. And I've been working for JetBlue now for almost 15 years on their social media team. So if you ever have a JetBlue flight and it's delayed and you tweet about it, or you post on Facebook or Instagram, like, why is my flight delayed, JetBlue? I'm one of the people that will reply to you and try to handle your complaint and make you not so angry, because air travel can be very stressful.
So what you're saying, Jeff, is you want us to say, hey, Jeff, help us out here. Anytime we have those instances, just send it straight
sure,
to the top.
You can name check me, and my teammates will be happy to let me take it instead of them.
That's funny. Cool.
So yeah, I lived in Holiday in the Salt Lake area for quite a while. And while I was there, basically since I got home from my mission, I, would be dating on and off. Never really came that close to marriage until 7 years ago. On the Mutual app, I met a great woman named Heather, who lived in North Ogden. And so it was like an hour drive each way for one of us to come and see the other. So we had to decide pretty quickly if we liked each other enough to keep dating, and we decided we did, and that it was worth it. And so we dated for about 1.5 years, and just celebrated our 5-year wedding anniversary last month. So that's going great.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of what's been going on since the mission.
So you've been married 5 years, no kiddos?
She has 4 kids from her first marriage, so
okay.
I'm a stepdad.
Nice.
But no, we don't have any of our own since we got married.
Hey,
and the 3 oldest are already out of the house.
Count, though. You ultimately still have to be a father figure in some capacity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the 3 oldest are already grown up and out of the house, and the youngest is going into 9th grade, and so we have her every other week.
Nice. Very cool. Well, that's a wonderful check-in of all the things you've been up to in the last 24 years or so. I mean, you've been a little bit busy, and that's awesome. Good for you, Jeff. Well, take us back now to the mission. You can start, as early as the MTC and your experience there, or you can jump straight to Scotland. It's up to you.
All right. The MTC was great. Don't have the personal experience of like Provo to compare it to, but seen the videos and dropped my brother off, and so like it was kind of surprising how small the MTC was compared to what I would have expected going to Provo. But I was a fan of that. We had 10 missionaries in our MTC district, 2 that were going to South Africa and the rest going to Scotland. I had a companion that was a bit of a challenge. So I was really grateful that it wasn't just the 2 of us, that I had my whole district there to help me with him. He had some temper issues, and I hope that I was a good companion to him. As I think back on my mission, there were several companions that I didn't necessarily have a great relationship with, and I know of things that happened with them with other companions, and in a way I'm like, oh, I got lucky that it wasn't any worse than that with me. But then also wonder if maybe the Lord knew that I wouldn't be able to handle the toughest parts.
Yeah. It's interesting to look back and see those moments, right?
He was a recent convert, and just getting the hang of things in the church as a missionary, and I had a few temper flare-ups that were tricky to deal with, but he ended up finishing his mission, which I was not sure would happen at the start. So I'm glad that things worked out for him. So yeah, it was just a couple of weeks in the MTC, and we came up to Scotland, got picked up by the APs, and they took us out tracting. And actually, so I was with one of the APs named Elder Anderson, and he was awesome. And I was lucky enough to go with him. Some of my district mates got sent out on their own, like 2 brand new greenies together, knocking on doors. But I had an experienced missionary with me, so he did the first few, then had me knock on a door, and I have no idea what I said, stammered through something, but we actually got let in the first time I did a door approach while chapping, and
Wow.
definitely was not the norm for the next 2 years, but it was pretty great to be able to be part of a first discussion on my first day out of the MTC. And when we go to zone conferences, I'd ask the APs if they were still teaching the guy, and they met with him for 3 or 4 months. He didn't end up getting baptized, but it was a good start, encouraging start to missionary work. And
Yeah, for sure.
then the next day, our trainers came to pick us up, and my trainer was Elder Tori Schoonmaker from Colorado, and our first area was what's it called? You guys know Cumbernauld. that was whatever. Like you've been in Cumbernauld, I'm like, oh, what's it called? Because that was like a ad campaign when they were really building the town bigger and building a lot of housing and trying to get people to move there in the 70s and 80s. What's it called? Cumbernauld. But
That's so
actually
funny.
To go back. So before Schoonmaker picked me up the weekend before, the missionaries in Cumbernauld had been playing soccer and football with some kids in the neighborhood. And after they were done playing, my trainer, Schoonmaker, was swinging on the goalpost, and he lost his grip and kind of swung one hand around to the other side to catch himself, but he caught his hand on one of the hooks where they hang the net and tore the whole pad of flesh in his hand. And
Goodness.
Miraculously no permanent nerve damage, but pretty bad injury. And they took him to the hospital, and they would not operate on him because they said they had to keep the operating theater open because the Orange Walk was happening that day. You guys know what the Orange Walks are?
Yeah, man.
Where the Protestants march and the Catholics take offense, and there's usually fighting. And in case someone gets stabbed at the Orange Walk, we have to keep the operating theater available for a more serious injury. And sure enough, someone did get stabbed at the Orange Walk and had to come to the hospital that night. But he eventually got patched up, and then so that was on a Saturday, and then the next day, Sunday, they had been teaching a teenage girl, a friend of one of the members, named Claire, and she got baptized the next day on Sunday. And then I don't remember if it was that night or the next day, but within 24 hours of her baptism, she got taken to the hospital with appendicitis and had to have her appendix removed. So she was in the same hospital with my soon-to-be trainer. And so he comes and picks me up at the mission home, and Sister Clyde kept us after him, and all the other missionaries left to go to their areas because she wanted to look at his injury. And so he unwrapped his hand, and she looked at it, and then she rewrapped it and gave him some pain medication. And then we headed back on the train to Cumbernauld. And then after we, dropped my bags off and did our grocery shopping or whatever that night, we went to the hospital, which is out of our area. I think it was in the Airdrie area, so not too far, but it was all foreign to me. I didn't know where anything was. So we went to visit this girl that got baptized. And while we were there visiting her in the hospital, my trainer starts to get really loopy from the pain meds, and he was basically out of it. And I was starting to freak out because I had no idea where we were. I didn't know where our flat was. I had no idea what our phone number was. I'm like, what are we going to do? Luckily, her friend that was a member that introduced her to the missionaries, her and her mom came to visit her that night too, and so they were able to take us home for an hour or so there. I was like, I have no idea how we're going to get home
Oh
tonight.
boy.
So that was my first night out of the MTC, out of the mission home in Cumbernauld. We had 4 elders there. It was a pretty small branch, the smallest like actual dedicated church building that I think I've ever been in. And our zone leader, Elder Buffington, he only had, we were on 4-week transfers at this point. He only had 8 weeks left until he went home. And Star Wars Episode 1 had just come out. Like I saw that in the theater about 2 weeks before I left on my mission. And it hadn't even come out yet in Scotland by the time I got there because it was delayed a little bit. But he was a big Star Wars fan. I was really excited to hopefully avoid any spoilers and see the movie as soon as he got home. And so if he ever did anything to bug me, I'm like, better knock it off or I'll tell you what happens in Star Wars. And so then he would leave me alone.
I love it.
I was only with Elder Schoonmaker for 4 weeks, and then he got transferred, and then I was companions with Elder Mark Gottfredson, and we had a good time. I liked him a lot as a companion, and we were also together only for 4 weeks. During that time, though, we got to just in those first 8 weeks, we got to go back to Edinburgh a couple times. Once for the tattoo, and once also my first zone conference was actually a full mission conference. Richard G. Scott came and visited the mission, and that was a great experience to be there with him and to reunite with all my MTC buddies only like 3 weeks after we had last seen each other. But that was a pretty cool first zone conference. So after those first 8 weeks, they actually reduced Cumbernauld from 2 companionships down to just 1 set. And so I got moved, and they kept, and then Elder Buffington went home, and so they kept the other 2, put them together, and so that way someone knew something from each of the areas. But that was kind of the beginning of, by the end of my first year, I felt like I was kind of a jinx, as you'll see as I go through what happened to areas as I left. Like for this one, we went down from 4 missionaries to 2. I didn't get any chances to teach in that area, but and I was sad to go. I really liked working with Elder Gottfredson. But I then moved to Johnston, which I think is it Zach that you served in Johnston? I've heard on some of the other podcasts.
Yeah, I did.
So I was the zone leader companion, so I was in a car area, and so we had the outer villages like Houston and Bridge of Weir, and there were no missionaries in Beath at that point, so we covered that a little bit when we could. And I can't remember the names of some of the other places, but I was with Elder Rob Sherwood from Calgary, Canada. He was my only companion not from the US. I never had any European companions, so I think that contributed. When I came home, I didn't have any kind of British accent, but my Utah accent was at least a little bit muted. So, and I was there with Elder Sherwood for 12 weeks for 3 transfers. Liked the ward a lot there. The bishop was from America, Bishop Hale. And so I liked him a lot. We were there for Thanksgiving, and there were 2 other Americans in the ward. And so every Thanksgiving, they had a big Thanksgiving dinner at the ward, and they invited the missionaries. So that was kind of cool. Hope to feel like we were at home with an American Thanksgiving dinner. And I was just a few months out on my mission. The Hales were also great. Like his wife. Do you know the Clarks? Like was Larry Hale still there when you were in Johnston?
Oh yeah, they were all still there. Absolutely.
So I used to get told I wore contacts back then, and so I used to get told all the time that I looked like Danny Clark. I don't know if he was still alive, or the Clarks. They lived out.
I don't remember Danny. No.
Castle Semple area, but he was, I think, part of the original. I think he was like the first ever stake clerk in Scotland, like when they organized the first stake in the 60s. So he was like an original, 20th century Scottish member. And that was Bishop Hale's father-in-law.
Okay.
And so, but we would eat dinner at the Hales every Sunday night, every Sunday after church. And I remember one time we were giving one of their daughters a hard time because she was a vegetarian. And I guess we pushed it too far because finally her mom was like, well, you know, in the millennium, even the lambs and the lions will get along. And so if lions aren't eating meat, what chance do you think you have? Like, well, I'll probably be vegetarians. And so that shut us up and we left her alone. But yeah, Johnston was great. Elder Sherwood was great. He would talk in his sleep sometimes, but like you knew that he was having like righteous thoughts when he went to bed, because he would be doing like door approaches in his sleep talking. He'd be like, we just want to share a message with you.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so he was I liked him a lot, but we did also argue sometimes. Like, this is, like I was saying, I was a little naive and inexperienced with life, even though I thought I knew everything. Like, I remember getting mad at him one time because I was getting breakfast ready and I had poured like milk in my cereal, and then he was running the microwave and he moved my milk and put it on top of the microwave, and I'm like, don't do that, like it'll heat it up and spoil the milk just by sitting on top of the microwave. So I definitely didn't know as much as I thought I did. But so I had a good like, Johnston was comparatively normal as far as my tenure there and how it ended, as far as like no drastic changes to the area, which is not the norm for my first few areas. We still didn't get to teach that often, but I have a lot of good memories from the Johnston area. But I got moved then to East Kilbride, and still in a 4-man flat. And there we had our last 4-week transfer until they switched to the 6-week schedule. And so I was only there for 10 weeks, and I had a companion there. The ones that I might have some not so great things to say about, or things that they might not want said on a podcast, I won't name. But people who were around back then will probably know who I'm talking about. But he was really indecisive. Like, we would make our plan for the day, but then like if an appointment fell through, we'd like go to the corner of the block and he'd pull out his map of the area and just like stare at it for like 10 minutes and like not decide on anything to do. And then I'd make a suggestion, like, we could go visit this person, or we could go tract in this neighborhood, and he'd see like, I guess, like his he had a pretty heavy Southern Utah accent, and almost like he's like, if this doesn't work out, it's your fault. Like, I guess, and we'd go and do it. And he just was really indecisive, also really quiet. We didn't talk that much. There was one neighborhood that was kind of like the one somewhat wealthy neighborhood in our area, and so we'd only go there at night because most people were working during the day. But there's also only like one bus an hour, and so we'd have to stop pretty early to make sure we didn't miss that bus, because it was like the farthest away. We lived in a high flat in East Kilbride on like the 17th floor. And so one night we were there at the bus stop, and we'd been there probably almost 10 minutes without saying a word to each other. And I thought to myself, like, this is stupid. Like, we're companions. We should talk to each other. And so I said to him, "Did you ever find Bugs Bunny attractive when he put on a dress and played a girl bunny?" And he just says, "Nope." No follow-up questions. And so I wait a minute, and I'm like, "Have you seen Wayne's World?" It's like, "I think so. I don't really remember it." Like, well, I was making a reference to Wayne's World and just asking about wearing dresses in the middle of the night.
Jeez. Oh boy.
We also, on a P day, his parents really wanted him to get a kilt, so we went into Glasgow City Center on a P day, and we spent like over 2 hours in a kilt shop, because again, he just couldn't make up his mind on anything that he wanted. And so I was so bored, but after we'd been there for like an hour, this group of Americans came in, and they were very clearly Americans, because they were talking loud, and also you could hear their accents, and they were looking at all this souvenir stuff. And one lady kept saying like, "Oh, you should get this belt." There was like 2 guys and 2 girls. One of the girls was saying to one of the guys, "You should get this belt. It'll look really great with your pants." And I could see like the store clerks trying to hold in their laughter. so they were there for a while too, but they still finished before us because we were there for so long. And they're checking out. The cashier was like, "So you folks here on holiday?" And the woman that said pants said, "Actually, we're in a band. Have you ever heard of Filter? I don't know if you know the late 90s band Filter. That's why I say, hey man, nice shot." Like they had a couple of radio hits in the 90s. So I saw some minor celebrities unknowingly embarrass themselves in a kilt shop in Glasgow. So that was a good memory. But so the other missionaries in the flat, the other three, I got kind of frustrated because they would often just like sleep in, like not even like get out of bed until like 9 o'clock. And I was still pretty new on my mission and had, kind of a self-righteous issue as well. But like I would not like really intending to tattle or to narc or anything, but I would like write like some of my feelings in my president's letters, treating it more like a journal, not thinking that like anything was going to happen from it other than maybe giving me a chance to vent, and then maybe like at the next interview, getting encouragement, like, do the best you can. But like President Clyde actually called our flat one night, and I answered the phone, and he spoke to all three of the others and kind of chewed them out, and like I felt bad like that I had gotten them in trouble. That wasn't my intention, but also like we weren't doing what we were supposed to do, and I didn't handle that the best way, and obviously that created some hard feelings towards me from them, rightfully so. But like, and so they did better for a little while, but then like it started up again to the point where I had been invited to speak in the sacrament meeting coming up and was told I could choose my own topic. And in addition to us not always doing what we should, as far as like, working the missionary schedule, we also had that was the area that I had the most dinner appointments in, which was great. But also some of the members, like, some encouraged and others allowed us to stay like hours and hours, like, and we were just spending a lot of time at these dinner appointments, and I was getting frustrated by that. And so I decided for this talk, I'm like, I'm going to go through the white missionary handbook, and I'm going to write down every single rule that's in there in like an itemized list, so I can like count like how many instructions, how many rules missionaries are supposed to follow, so I can have an exact number. And then in my talk, I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to mention some of the rules that we're not keeping, and some of the ones that the members are like enabling us in our lack of keeping. And and I don't subscribe to the everything happens for a reason philosophy. I actually probably swing too far the opposite way and think that like most things just happen. But I do believe that divine intervention happens sometimes, and I think this was probably one of those times, because I actually got moved during the week before I was supposed to give that talk. And I think back on that now, and like I am so glad that I did not get the opportunity to give a talk like that, because that wouldn't have been good for me or my companions or the members. That would not have been a helpful or productive thing to do. So I'm really glad that I was prevented from doing that. But again, I felt kind of like a jinx, because again, we had a 4 missionary area that got condensed down to 2. With one of the others went home, and then 2 of us were moved, and 1 new missionary came in. It's like, man, I'm jinxing all these areas. They're losing missionaries when I come through. And from there, I was transferred to Aberdeen in the Bridge of Dawn ward. And I was there with Elder Wade Finlinson. He had been the zone leader companion in the Glasgow zone when I was a greenie in Cumbernauld. So I had met him and really liked him. I was excited to be his companion. And anyone that was his companion would probably say he was their favorite. Like, I love Elder Finlinson. He has never been on social media that I know of. If you had a way to track him down. For one thing, that would be miraculous because he's kind of disappeared as far as I know, but also like he would be awesome to have on the podcast, but I really don't know how you would get in touch with him. But yeah, he was my favorite companion. We
Do you know
were
where he
only
was
together.
from?
What's that?
Do you know where he was from?
He is from Oak City, Utah, the hometown of President James E. Faust. And so, like years later, I was in a singles ward with some girls from Delta, which is like the big city. The Oak City is a suburb of, and so they knew him from high school, but even they didn't know what had happened to him over the last that was in 2010, and they weren't aware of what he was doing at that point. So I hope you're well, Wade Finlayson, wherever you are, and if you ever come across this, you should come on the podcast too, because I'd love to know what you're doing with your life. But
That's awesome.
the next transfer was, I guess, to bring us in alignment with the rest of the Europe area or whatever. We had a 7-week transfer for one time only, and then the rest were 6 weeks from then on. And so we were only there together for 7 weeks. It was a 4-man flat again, and this was right in the heart of Aberdeen. The closest I ever came to an inner city experience, though downtown Aberdeen is nothing compared to downtown Glasgow, from what I understand. We were there with the zone leader, and then Tyler Snow, who was on your podcast, and would be one of my future companions. He was the zone leader companion. We had this amazing jetted tub in the flat, so we took baths. Nice. And it was great. But the zone leader had actually just moved to Aberdeen from East Kilbride, and he had heard probably from members or maybe from the missionaries about my tattling, my rat-like behavior in East Kilbride, and so I have no idea how far that spread, but I know it went beyond just that flat in East Kilbride. So again, I could have done things better there, and again, really glad I didn't give that sacrament meeting talk. But so that created some awkward conversations with that zone leader in Aberdeen. But other than that, my short time in Aberdeen was awesome. Very fortunate to meet a young guy, probably about the same age as us, named Paul Kirkwood, that he let us come in. We spent him from tracting, and we taught him a first discussion, and we got to go back a few days later for a second discussion, and we invited him to be baptized, and he said yes. And I had never experienced that before, and so I was taken aback. like really? Oh wow, great. Some people do actually say yes. And so finally, this was about 9 months into my mission, I finally was able to be part of teaching someone who was baptized, and then I think it was definitely less than 2 weeks later, got moved again. And Elder Finlayson also got moved. They whitewashed our area, and the new senior companion coming in was also training. So wow, we must have really screwed up. They're taking us both out and making the new guy train even. That's so 3 of those, I'd already been through 4 areas in less than 10 months. And 3 of those had drastic changes occur to the missionaries serving there with me moving. So I was excited that I had seen Paul get baptized, but I was really bummed to be leaving the area so soon, and also really feeling like there must be something wrong with me at this point, that they kept having to make big changes to the areas I was serving in. Got a couple of notes here. I'm just trying to make sure I didn't skip anything I wanted to talk about. I think I'm doing pretty good. But I got moved to Hamilton at that point, and I was made senior companion. So I'm well, even though they must not think I'm too awful if they're trusting me enough to be senior companion. And this was my first ever 2-man flat. And I was there for 4 transfers, so almost 6 months. Wow. And my first companion there, he had been out longer than me, and so he was a little resentful or offended, I think, that he was the junior companion, to, even though he'd been on his mission a few months longer than me. which I probably would have reacted the same way. So, but we didn't get along all that great. But one of my more memorable experiences looking back was with him. We got led into a house where there was probably 5 or 6 youngish people, probably in their early 20s, that were all there. I'm not sure how many of them lived there. And, you know, a couple of them were somewhat curious, at least about us and why we were there. One of them was potentially curious about like religion and God, but the others kept like derailing the conversation. I'm pretty sure some illegal substances were being consumed. But we were led into houses so infrequently that we stayed for a while and tried to get the conversation on track. And eventually, when it wasn't really being productive, we left. And when we were walking away, I could tell my companion was mad. And like, what's going on? Like, what's the matter? And he didn't want to say it first, but finally he's like, why did you tell those people that you could answer any questions that they have? And I thought back, and it is something that I had said. And you know, I'm sure part of it was like me just trying to get the conversation back on track. And part of it was actually meaning like, well, the gospel has the answers to the important questions, and then the weird questions that you're asking won't matter so much if you get those more basic questions answered. But part of it probably was, again, that I'm like, if you'll just give me a chance, yeah, I know enough that I can answer anything that that you might have to ask. And so again, I still have issues with this at times, but hopefully I think I've gotten a lot better at being a little more humble and acknowledging that I don't know everything. But yeah, I used to to think that I knew everything and could answer anyone's questions just with my knowledge and maybe a little bit of the Spirit thrown in. So yeah, that was a recurring theme on my mission of me needing to be humbled. So we were only together for I think 6 weeks, and then I got my first greenie, Elder Stroh from Spokane, Washington. And so that was a little intimidating. It was the, I guess, in Cumbernauld I had it as well, but it was only the second time that I had, first of all, had to know how to get around the area, like the one that had been in the area the longest, let alone in the mission the longest. I didn't have a great sense of direction. We probably took the wrong bus a few times. But Elder Stroh was great. He was really enthusiastic and fun to work with. And before I got there, before I got to Hamilton, the missionaries had been teaching a family in a village called Straven, which is a pretty long bus ride from Hamilton. And it was did you serve in Hamilton, Zach?
I did, yeah.
Awesome. This was the Moyer family. It was a grandma and 3 granddaughters. I feel so bad. Like, I was really good at all the memorizing stuff on my mission, but I was trying to remember all the granddaughters' names. And I know that the oldest was Jacqueline. I think the grandma was Anne Marie, but Anne Marie might have been one of the granddaughters' names. But I think besides Jacqueline, all 3 of the others started with an A. But anyway, they had been teaching and going out to visit them like once a week for a while, and it had kind of stagnated. When Elder Stroh came, we started going more often, and something clicked or sparked, and they actually accepted the invitation to be baptized. And so we were able to baptize the grandma and the 2 younger granddaughters. And then eventually, about a month or 2 months later, the older granddaughter also got baptized. So that was definitely one of the more memorable experiences, even though I can't remember all of their first names. Were they still around?
I was only there for 6 weeks, and so there were a few people that I connected with, but that's not a name that rings a bell, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I did really bad. Like, email didn't really become ubiquitous until probably like a year after I ended my mission. And if I had gotten emails from members or other missionaries, I probably would have at this point, I probably would have slowed down, but I would have done a better job of keeping in contact with people than I have. So I'm not really in contact with any of the Scottish members, unfortunately, still to know like what's going on with them. I would imagine the grandma has probably passed away at this point, but yeah, so I feel bad that I don't know more about how they did after we left, but it was awesome to see them get baptized. And then so I was with Elder Stroh, I think, for about 12 weeks. And then Elder Ben Bright, talked about this in his episode from about 2 weeks ago, that there was a group of missionaries called to the Czech Republic that couldn't get visas. And so they had been in like Boston and Fort Lauderdale for a few months waiting to see if that could get worked out. And I guess they decided it wasn't going to happen. So they gave them the option to either stay where they were or to be reassigned. And so I think a bunch went to Ireland, and we got 6 or 7 of them in Scotland. And I got one, Elder Christiansen, that Bright mentioned in his podcast episode. So he was kind of like my mission stepson, since he had already been on his mission a few months, but I was his first companion in Scotland.
Nice.
And to some degree or another, I think they all kind of struggled with not being able to serve in the place they had been assigned, and having learned the language seemingly for nothing. Elder Christiansen really had a hard time. Elder Bednar gave a talk a few years ago in conference about, like being called as a missionary and then assigned to a particular field of labor. I don't think that distinction has always been that clear. I think that would have been really helpful to these missionaries. But so I felt for him, but like we didn't get along that great. I know that Elder Bright told the story. I probably wouldn't have mentioned his name, but since Bright already did, that he kind of ran off on his companion that took my place. And so things never got that bad with me and him, but we didn't get along that great. And that's, again, thinking back to like my MTC companion, where I know that other companions had even a harder time with him than I did. So I hope that I didn't, that I was some type of comfort or help, or at least, didn't make things worse for them. But, it's hard to say now, but yeah, I'm sure that I could have done a better job at helping him to adjust to being in Scotland. But he was there when the final granddaughter got baptized, so he still at least got to see some success in the form of baptisms pretty shortly after coming. And I can't remember, one of another memorable experience happened in Hamilton. I can't remember if it was with Stroh or with Christiansen, but another companionship in the zone was having a baptism, and they didn't have a font in their area, so they were going to come to Hamilton and do the baptism. And so we got tasked with filling the font, and then also President Wilkinson was coming, was going to do like a missionary fireside after the baptism. So like, it's kind of a big deal, at least in my mind. These things happening in Hamilton, and so we go to the church. It was on a Sunday to start filling the font, which probably took about an hour, and the building was locked, and we didn't have keys, and back then we didn't have cell phones. With Sunday bus service, it would have taken too long to go back to our flat and call people to see if we could borrow someone's keys. And so we basically just had to wait there and hope someone would show up. And then no one did until they actually showed up for the baptism, and we hadn't even started filling the font. And I was really stressed out. I'm like, what's President Wilkinson going to think? We're going to ruin the whole night. President Wilkinson gets there and he's like, well, let's just start filling the font, and we'll do the fireside first and the baptism after. And that's what we did. And it was no big deal at all. And everything went great eventually. And kind of an epiphany. It was like, no matter, like, I can do everything right, and it still might, not result in things going how I want them to, or things might go right and it had nothing to do with me. And so, like, still, again, I was focusing too much on, like, thinking that it all depended on me, when it really, in missionary work or in the gospel, depends on the Spirit and on the Lord. And so that was a lesson that I still am working on and learning, but that was a kind of a turning point for me in the mission. Just had something else from Hamilton. I don't remember what I was going to say. I was just going to say that if you haven't listened to Ben Bright's podcast episode, anyone watching this, you should go back and listen to that. It was just posted a couple weeks ago. He has some amazing stories. I was actually his district leader at the time of when the guys came to their flat and they started the fight after the car crash. Like, so I wasn't there in person for it, but, like, I heard about it shortly after. They lived with the zone leader, so, like, my district leader responsibilities weren't as important, I guess, as they might normally be. But, like, yeah, I heard about that after, and it was crazy. And, like, I'm so glad I'm in the suburbs and not in the center of Glasgow. But
Yeah,
he
agree.
had some great stories.
That was one of our most epic missionary involved bar fights.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, so funny.
So after 24 weeks in Hamilton, I got moved to Greenock, back in the Johnston zone, and back in a 4-man flat. And both senior companions got changed at the same time, and the other senior companion coming in had been the other junior companion in my flat in East Kilbride, and so I hadn't seen him since then, and so I was a little nervous. Like, is he still gonna be annoyed at me for what happened there? Or is that gonna be a big deal? But, like, it never got mentioned. Like, even if we talked about, like, stuff we did in East Kilbride, that never came up, and we actually got along really great. And so I was really grateful for that. And so even though I felt like I had been maturing and learning and developing, like, a more well-rounded approach to life and to the gospel, that progress isn't always linear. And in Greenock, maybe regressed a little, or, like, swung the pendulum too far the other way. And we had some challenges in Greenock. I was there for 24 weeks again. We had some challenges in staying motivated. Like, we had a really cool old apartment right on the Esplanade on the waterfront, and we had this giant, like sitting room with, like, big bay windows, and we moved all of our beds into that room and, like, turned it into a giant bedroom. And then we each had, like, a bedroom turned into, like, a personal, like, wardrobe or changing room, and we set up, like, a card table in one of the bedrooms and played Monopoly all the time. And like, met these people that gave us, like, a cool tape deck with some Star Wars tapes, and we would lay in our beds all in the big room, and that would be, like, our companionship study, that we would listen to, like, these Star Wars novelizations. And like, we would take, like, long lunch breaks and play Monopoly. And so, like, and so that's not something I'm proud of, even though it was, like, so I wonder now, like, if the members loved us. Like, we got taken good care of by a lot of the members there, but I wonder if they would have trusted us to actually teach the gospel to investigators. We didn't have a lot of teaching opportunities there, and I think it might have been because that we weren't as dedicated as we should have been. There were some cool old ladies named Marge and Sadie that had, like, the bottom floor apartment in our building, and missionaries had been visiting them for years. I had actually met them when I was on exchanges when I had been in Johnston, and we would do yard work for them, and they would feed us lunch, like, once a week. And was through them that I found out about like a lot of big world events, like the 2000 Olympics, or like they were the first ones that told us that like the 2000 presidential election was contested and no one knew who the president was going to be. Good thing that we never have any issues with elections nowadays, but back in 2000 it was great. And so again, my jinx came back in Greenock because after I'd been there for a while, they moved two of the missionaries out and brought in one, and I was in a trio for my last 6 weeks there. And so then I actually got to be companions with my friend from East Kilbride, and then we brought in Elder Jenkins, and so we were together for a little while. That was better than I thought it would be. Being in a trio, it's definitely more complicated, but I had two good companions that we made that work. And so both Bright and Tyler Snow have mentioned something about one of those Czech Republic missionaries, like hitchhiking from Orkney or Shetland and down to Edinburgh, and was eventually decided to go back and complete his mission. But I'd never heard, I don't think, their side of the story. But I actually was going to be the one that replaced that elder. I got like a unexpected call from President Wilkinson saying, like they said Shetland in their podcast. In my memory, I'd have to go back and check my journals. I think that I was going to be moving to Orkney. And so I was kind of bummed out that like I had to like be ready to go in like 24 hours. Wasn't going to get to say goodbye to people, and it was happening, not at a regular transfer time. And also Orkney was like way the heck up there in the middle of nowhere. And so I was almost done packing. Everyone else had gone to bed, and I got a call at like 1 or 2 a.m. I feel like saying, Elder Hofmann, you get to stay in Greenock after all, but thanks for being willing. I'm like, oh
my
okay.
God.
So I got to just go to bed and tell my companions the next morning that I was staying after all. But I ended up going to up in that zone after I left Greenock. They had just started doing co-zone leaders in each zone, and so I became one of the 2 zone leaders in the Inverness zone. Companions with Tyler Snow, who did the podcast not too long ago. And I didn't have my license, and also for other reasons, probably would never have been a zone leader if they hadn't switched to having 2 in each zone. But Inverness was an awesome place to end my mission. It was a car area, and I didn't have my license, so I didn't have to worry about doing any of the driving. Got there not long after the incident that has been talked about the missionaries getting in a car wreck looking for Madonna's wedding. So I wasn't one of the zone leaders for that, but the missionaries were still in the zone when I got there. So I got to hear about that story as well. Another classic. If you listen to the podcast, you'll get to hear some great stories. And the Finlayson was my favorite companion. Snow was probably second favorite. He just was such a good missionary, but also like fun at the same time. Like someone that I really respected and got along really well with. So, and I loved that when he gave me a quick shout out at the end of his episode, I was very pleased that the one thing he mentioned about me was that I could relate anything we were talking about to an episode of The Simpsons. So I'm glad if there's one thing that he remembers me for, that it's that. So we had a good time. If we had been up there when President Clyde was president, I don't think we would have got to travel very much, but President Wilkinson was like, I want the zone leaders to go visit the missionaries in their zone. So yours just happened to be the farthest away. So we got to go up to Thurso, and then from Thurso we took the ferry to Orkney one time, and the missionaries in Orkney had met someone that gave him an old lobster trap that they had tossed off a pier somewhere, and caught some eels in the lobster trap.
Oh
and they
my
made
God.
like an eel curry for us while we were there. It wasn't very good.
I was gonna say that I never heard that on a
different.
menu. So
yeah,
that
that's
sounds
not something
terrible.
you get. It's not something you get at the Chippy. And we actually had a flight booked to Shetland from Orkney, but it was foggy that day, and the flight got canceled, and so I didn't get to go to Shetland, and that was disappointing. Within a couple months after I left, the new zone leaders did get to go to Shetland. Really liked the ward in Inverness. It was the biggest ward I'd been in a couple areas. And I remember a general conference happening while we were there, and so we got members from like Alness and it's not Nairn. Nairn is the town you drove through, but Elgin. Yeah, they would come to watch conference with us, and between sessions, we'd go back to our flat and play Uno, and whoever got last place in the highest score in an Uno round had to down a pint of water before we did the next hand. And one of the sisters did really poorly and drank like 4 or 5 pints of water in between conference sessions, and so she had kept having to get up and go to the bathroom during the next session. Then the next morning on Sunday, I don't remember if it was actually April Fool's Day, but like it was a good prank. One of the counselors in the bishopric had gone to Germany on his mission, but like his German was pretty rusty. But the bishop had told him, like, I can't get the English satellite feed to work. I can only get the German. Like, can you come up and translate while we watch conference? He's like, I'll try. So he was prepared to try to do like live German translation of the general conference. And then when it started playing, it was in English, and he realized that he had been pranked. So that was a pretty good prank.
It's pretty good.
I was only with Elder Snow for 6 weeks. And then my final 12 weeks in the mission, I was with Elder Chris Frazier from Las Vegas. He'd be a good person to come on the podcast. He plays the bagpipes. He had also served in the mission office for a while right before coming to be my companion, so he probably has lots of good stories from that time. But I really liked Frazier a lot too. While he was there, just in my last few months, there had been a man named Bert Little that Elder Snow had been teaching for a while before I got there, and he had a really hard time giving up drinking. But besides that, he liked church and wanted to get baptized and loved it when we came over and taught him. But he just really struggled with alcohol. But he made a pretty dramatic improvement once Elder Frazier came and he was able to be baptized. We also met a guy that I was on exchanges with, Paul Williams. I haven't had a chance to listen to his podcast episode yet, but I plan to go back and do that. He was one of the assistants at the time with Elder Snow, who had gone on to be an assistant. And so he is up on exchanges with me, and we were walking to an appointment. Past a guy on the street, I would have just kept going probably, but Elder Williams stopped and talked to him. His name was Dave Williams, and he seemed pretty skeptical and didn't really seem like he was buying anything what Elder Williams was saying to him. But he actually agreed to take a Book of Mormon and gave us his address. And surprisingly, when we went and visited him the first time, he had been reading it and had lots of good questions, and but he progressed fairly quickly and was baptized in the last couple of weeks before I ended my mission. So someone that I wouldn't even have probably talked to on my own. And so that was a miracle that, again, I had really nothing to do with. Just got to observe, and it was great. And it still kind of sticks with me, both Paul in Aberdeen and then Dave in Inverness. Both of them, when they said that they'd be baptized, I was kind of surprised that there was not more giddiness or excitement, but it was just more of this resoluteness, yeah, this is, I'm convinced this is the right thing to do. It was more like a matter of fact, yeah, of course, I believe that this is true. So that's the logical next step, and I'll do it. So, so that was pretty fortunate, especially since there had been baptisms so few and far between in the first 20 plus months of my mission to have two right at the end. There was also a local member named Peter, who was, I think, 16, and he had a lot of disabilities, but had progressed to the point where he could finally be baptized. And so I think that, counted for our stats, but like was more the effort of his mom and the Ward family. But it was still cool to see that happen, and he was so excited for that, and his mom was too. And so so some good success with baptisms at the end, but also like being in Inverness is just like a cool location, and such a huge proselyting area. But like, with the cars, you have mileage limits, so you're not able to go everywhere you might want to. But we got Elder Frazier pulled some strings with his former companion in the mission office, and we turned a member referral into a media referral, which media referrals, they didn't count against your mileage, so it wasn't actually a referral, but like, we'll bring him a Lamb of God video. And so we got to drive out to the Isle of Skye in like my last week on my mission. Epic road trip, seeing all the castles and the amazing shoreline, and that's just such a pretty drive in the beautiful area of the country that I'm really glad I got to see.
That's cool.
There was also a member in Inverness that she would have us over for breakfast every Saturday morning, but I don't know if it was like ADHD or anxiety or something, but she like would not sit and talk to us at all. She really wanted us to keep coming. Like, she really wanted to serve us and give us breakfast, but like, she would bring the food in. This is an older lady, and then she would just like be like doing DIY projects in her house or working out in the garden. And she had some church videos or some church adjacent videos, and so that's where I saw the Donny Osmond, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat for the first time on VHS. And I fell in love, and we watched that like every week, like a month straight, and I had all the words memorized by the time I came home from my mission. So a lot of good times in Inverness, and so that was the last few months. And so then I came home, and still have great memories. Like I said before, I have not been very diligent in really being connected with other missionaries or members from the mission. I went to a few reunions in the first year or two after I got home, but I stopped doing that as well. I'm friends with a few members and missionaries on Facebook, but we don't really interact. But so it was really cool, even though like I'm not really in touch with these people anymore. When the temple was announced, General Conference for Edinburgh, I am in like an alumni group for President Clyde and for President Wilkinson on Facebook, and just to see like dozens of posts of like people excited for the temple, some that I didn't know, but a lot that I did know. And it's made me think of like Alma when he met the sons of Ammon, or the sons of Mosiah, coming back from their mission, and not only excited to just be reunited with his brethren, but excited that they were still his brethren in the Lord. And I know, lots of people from my family or from high school or from college or elsewhere that were in the church before and have fallen away. So it's really cool to, to see those people posting about the temple, or to have now discovered this podcast and to know that there are still a lot of people who are still our brethren in the Lord. So that's really exciting and heartening to see. And so, I'm really glad to have been part of it.
Yeah, we love that, Jeff. I can personally tell you that so by the end of my mission, the Inverness area was no longer a zone leader area, but there were still missionaries there. So I was fortunate to be the Aberdeen zone leader and got to do the traveling. Like we went to Stornoway and all sorts of things.
Stornoway had missionaries for about the first 6 months of my mission, but not the rest of the time.
Yeah,
that was part of the Inverness zone, but it was not covered at the time. That's
And
a huge zone. If it was
it was
Aberdeen
massive.
zone and Inverness, so.
It was massive. I don't think we ever got past like Urquhart Castle in Loch Ness. You know, it would take another day and a half to get back to Aberdeen. So, but my last companion, his greenie area was Inverness, and he was very good friends with Bert and with the Williams, and so we visited quite often because of his fondness of the ward there as well as those special people. So
that's awesome.
I assure you they were still
his first and last area. So if you want to hear some more follow up on Bert, go listen to Peacock's episode.
Yeah,
Peacock,
Brant Peacock is his name.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, one question we like to pose is, do you have any other specific memories of your interactions with President and Sister Clyde or President and Sister Wilkinson?
I had like basically an exact like 50-50 split, like 1 year with each of them, and I love them both. I think it's probably not a coincidence that kind of my shift in attitude from being like, you know, strict by the rules, like, you know, going to have success because of my efforts. Not that the Clydes preached that in any way, but, you know, with their demeanor and attitude, I think that helped to bring that about. My shift from that to hopefully a more loving and nuanced approach that matched like the more outgoing and loving personalities of the Wilkinsons. I don't think that's a coincidence. That's probably about the time that started to shift for me. So I love the Clydes. I definitely felt a stronger connection with the Wilkinsons. Yeah, I remember seeing people's pictures of being in the, like when Les Mis, I think, came on its first tour to Edinburgh. President Clyde actually took the whole mission. This was about a year before I got there, but they all got to go to see Les Mis
wow,
in the
that's
theater.
Awesome.
And so just got an alert that my battery is low. Hopefully it doesn't die on us here. So I was kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised that he would do that. And I'm not sure if he's the one that started the tradition of going to the tattoo, but yeah, the Clydes were great. I don't necessarily have a ton of specific memories of either of them that are coming to mind right now, but I love both couples. They're both great.
No, that's perfect. I love it. Well, Jeff, again, we really appreciate you making the time to come and chat with us tonight.
Can I make one more recommendation of someone to get on the podcast? I don't think I've ever actually met them, but I would love to hear their stories. And that's Burke Olson. Tyler Snow mentioned him. I can't remember if he was like his trainer or his second companion. He actually had been in Cumbernauld and had been Buffington's companion and moved right when I got there. And he was there for about 9 months and then finished his mission overlapping with me, but I never met him. But like, I heard from people in Cumbernauld that he had told them that he survived a plane crash in Alaska when he was younger. And I knew a bunch of missionaries that talked about Sting recording an album of primary songs, but it was actually the EFY singer Brett Raymond. But I think it was Burke Olson who had convinced people that it was Sting. So he, as far as I can tell, he seems to be quite a character and a storyteller. So I think that if we could get him on the podcast, that would be.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, that's a great little segue for us. You mentioned Burke. We'll certainly try and track him down. My suggestion to you, because you are a half and halfer between the Clydes and the Wilkinsons, is if you will share your podcast in those pages, we might get in touch with more people than you may think that would be interested in coming on the podcast. And so for anyone who's listening to Jeff's podcast, having found it on one of those pages, visit our website, 51spylaw.com. Click on the button at the top that says fill out a contact sheet, and then we will figure out a time to come in to have you guys come on the podcast and share your experience. But more than anything, Jeff, we just want to express to you our love for you as our brother in Scotland. Thank you for being one for those of us that came after you, that paved the way and set a great example and made the Scotland mission what it was and continues to be today. So again, Jeff, we really appreciate you and we love you, our brother.
Right back at you.
Awesome. Well, we'll give you a cheerio and we'll certainly talk more soon. But again, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk again.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye, Jeff.